In the first part of working with a data set, one of the things that you're going to want to do is to clean up the data set. So we're going to do that together in this short video using the data set that we have provided in Blackboard. So actually one of the first things that you'll want to do is to convert a lot of this information that you have here in these columns. You'll want to convert that to numbers, and that'll be important when it comes to some of the analyses that we'll do a little bit later on. Not all of them, but some of them. So actually what I want to do first is I want you to save two versions of this data file. I want you to have a version of this data set that is exactly like the original, it's just like this. And then I want you to have one that is edited. So what you might want to do first is you might want to just go and do a quick save as, and create a new file. Just maybe unedited, something up here, something like that. So I'm not going to do that because I don't need to on this computer, but that's what I want you to do first. So again, you'll have two copies. You'll have one copy that is just the original, and then we'll have this copy that you're going to work with. So again, one of the things that we need to do is we need to take this information that is not in numerical format, some of it, and we need to change it into a numerical format. So you'll see that one of these is done for you already. You see this column that says plant is actually already listed by number. So plant number 1, plant number 2, plant number 3 and 4, and so on and so forth, all the way down to number 13. So what could have been in there instead would be, for example, plant number 1, Louisville, Kentucky. It could have said Louisville, Kentucky all the way down this column. We would still want to change it to a number, but that's already done for you, so we don't really have to worry about that. However, when it comes to these other categories, we do want to go ahead and change them to numbers. And this process is called dummy coding. So dummy coding is essentially the act of taking what is known as a categorical variable and changing it to a number. Okay. Now, in order to not confuse yourself, one thing that most people always do when you're dealing with data like this is you create what's called a glossary, or a code book or a guidebook, but typically a data glossary. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to open a Word document, and you'll want to create a table, just a simple table. So we'll just insert a simple table here, and you can make this table however you want to make it. But essentially what you're going to do is let's start with gender, for example. So we're going to put gender here. We're going to say female, male, and then our final response was, let's go back to the data set and see, choose not to respond. Okay, so we're going to put choose not to respond as our third category, choose not to respond. Okay, now what we're going to do is make sure that we keep track of all of these numbers by listing that in our glossary. Okay, so typically just a couple things you might think about when we're doing dummy coding. The actual numbers that you use are not really that important. What is important is that you keep track of exactly what those numbers are, though. So for example, you could use a 1 here, a 2 here, and a 3 here. You could do 2, 4, 6. You could do whatever. But it's important that you just keep track of these numbers, and the simplest way to do this is, again, just to start with 1. Some people, when they're doing this kind of dummy coding, they might start with 0 and do 1 and 2. That's okay. You are able to do that, but typically if we start to do things like correlations and that sort of stuff, it's just kind of easier to have numbers that are not 0. So again, you'll want to do this with all of your categorical variables over here in this spreadsheet. So I'm going to show you the one column here, the gender column, and we'll play with that. Okay, so again, you have your glossary here. So this is what we're going to use. Okay, so we won't try not to forget that. Now, when it comes to these other categories, again, you'll just want to maybe do it maybe alphabetically. That's okay. Do it alphabetically. For age, it's probably makes most sense if you start with the youngest age. So it looks like 20 to 24 is the youngest age, and then the next one would be 25 to 29, and then what would we have? 30 to 34, I guess we would have. I don't see it. Yeah, right here. So anyway, you would just go up in sequence like that. But for something like gender, race, plant, job status, those don't really, those are nominal categories. They are nominal categorical variables, so we don't really have a sequence to them. So going by alphabetical order is fine to do that. So now what I'm going to show you, the way that I convert these to numbers, is just the way I do it. There are other ways to do it. There's actually formulas that you can use in Excel to do it, but this is the way that I find is typically the easiest to do. So what I'll do is I'll just do a find and replace. There's also other kinds of software that will do this in a more sophisticated way, but honestly, with the data that we're working with, this is just the easiest way to do it. So I'm just going to go to Edit, Find, Replace, and you see I've already been kind of playing with this a little bit. So what I'll do first is let's do female, replace with. Now let's go back to our data sheet and just double check. So female is being replaced with 1. So replace with 1. And I'll do replace, and you'll see that, okay, great. So it's this first one up here has been changed. So you now see participant 1 has now had gender changed from female to 1. Okay, so that's great. Now we could click this over and over again, but if we just hit replace all, it just does it all for us automatically. So great, that's wonderful. Now since we have this up, we'll just go ahead and do male. So male again, if we look over here, is 2. So we'll replace male with 2. Hit replace all. Great. Done. And then we'll say choose not to respond. Now, one tip for you when you're doing this, when you type this into the find, the selection right here, you have to type it exactly as it is. One way that you could actually do this is you could actually just copy and paste what's in your sheet and put it here. So let me just close this and I'll give you an example. So the first time I was working with this data set, I actually wrote choose not to answer or something like that. And it said, oh, we couldn't find this. So I was like, oh gosh, well, what did I do wrong? So I can just come in here. I can select this information, hit Control C for copy, go back to Edit, Find, Replace. Select this, Control V for paste, and replace with 3. Hit replace all. Oops, something's not working. I bet it's because I have something selected. Okay, let's try this again. Edit, find, replace. Replace all. Okay, so we're good. So we'll close that, and so that took care of our gender category. Now, for these other ones, again, you'll just want to go back to your data glossary and fill that in. I would fill this in first as you go, just so you don't get confused, and just make sure that you're touching on all of these categories. So, for example, you'll do full-time as, say, 1 and part-time as 2. So, again, you would just go back to Edit, Find, Replace, and say FT as 1, and hit replace all, and it looks like it worked for us. Okay, so that's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Again, there is another way to do it with a formula, but it's a bit more complicated, and then you have to basically copy the formula all the way down the sheet. So this is just one way to do it. And for me, it seems to be the easiest. Again, don't forget though to keep your data guide. So I've already messed up, right? I need to write FT is 1. So I need to keep track of that because it can be really, really easy to lose track of that. So just keep in mind that you do need to keep track of this information.